Good morning. Thank you for being here. I'm New York State Attorney General Eric Schneiderman. The presence of so many of my colleagues in government here today reflects the urgency which we all feel in dealing with the matters that we're seeking to address through the letter I sent today to the governor. We are joined by two citywide officials, Public Advocate Tish James and Controller Scott Stringer, Congressman Jerry Nadler, the Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams, and the Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer, Senators Brad Hoylman, Gustavo Rivera, Jose Peralta, Adriano Espaillat, and Dan Squadron, Assembly members Nick Perry, Marcos Crespo, Michael Blake, Victor Pichardo, Mikhail Solange, Councilmember Yadanis Rodriguez, Mark Levine, Corey Johnson, Dan Gorodnik, Brad Lander, and Jimmy Van Bramer. We're also joined by Bishop Victor Brown, who presides at the Greater Mount Zion Baptist Church in Staten Island, where the Garner family worships, and Donna Lieberman of the New York Civil Liberties Union. I'm not surprised by the turnout because we stand here today in the shadow of a tragedy that weighs on the hearts of all New Yorkers and all Americans. Demonstrators across the country have been using Eric Garner's last words as a rallying cry for reform night after night in city after city. Demonstrations have taken place with people chanting, "I can't breathe," and it stops here. As powerful as those words are, for those of us who work in law enforcement and those of us who make public policy, the most troubling words were a simple statement from a grieving widow. Last week, after learning that a grand jury declined to indict anyone involved in her husband's death, Esau Garner was quoted as saying, quote, "Oh my God, are you serious?" Her words reflected more than just her own deeply personal pain. They reflect the sense of many New Yorkers and many Americans that our justice system does not provide equal justice for everyone, specifically to people of color killed during encounters with law enforcement. That erosion of trust and confidence must be addressed, and it must be addressed now. Many, including some of my colleagues here, have suggested that there is an inherent conflict when local district attorneys who work with police departments every day are asked to investigate members of those departments. I have the highest possible regard for the district attorneys of the state of New York. I work with many of them, but as prosecutors, it is time to acknowledge that the public has lost confidence in this part of our criminal justice system. Some have already proposed legislation that would address this apparent conflict. Some of the bills are mentioned in my letter to the governor. I look forward to working with everyone here to pass meaningful reforms at the state level that move us closer to the basic promise of equal justice under law for everyone. But the fact is we cannot afford to wait until the legislature returns to Albany, conducts its debates, and passes a bill. The crisis of confidence in our communities is real, it is powerful, and it carries an imminent risk of danger. When the trust between the police and the communities they serve and protect breaks down, everyone is at risk. New Yorkers must be able to trust the men and women of the New York Police Department. They must come forward to report crimes. They must be willing to come forward as witnesses. We cannot wait months for the legislature to act. We can and must act now. So this morning, I wrote to Governor Cuomo requesting that he act under the authority granted him under existing state law. Without waiting for new legislation to pass, he can issue an interim executive order directing me to investigate the circumstances surrounding the use of force by law enforcement officers that result in the death of unarmed civilians. Existing state law authorizes the governor to supersede any local district attorney on any criminal matter by appointing the attorney general to investigate and prosecute the case. This broad grant of authority is based in Article 4, Section 3 of the state constitution. It has been invoked in past cases. In addition, Executive Law Section 63 authorizes the governor to direct the attorney general to, quote, investigate the alleged commission of any indictable offense or offenses, close quote, and to prosecute when appropriate. Consistent with this legal authority, I'm calling on the governor to immediately issue a temporary standing order authorizing my office to investigate the circumstances surrounding cases in which unarmed civilians are killed as a result of the actions of a police officer or a peace officer. In order to avoid the possibility of compromising any state, local, or federal investigation already in progress, the order I'm proposing would apply only to incidents occurring on or after the date it is signed. And the order should explicitly state that it expires when the legislature acts to permanently address this issue in such manner as it deems appropriate. It is a simple, immediate, and effective solution. It is something we can do today to once again show the leadership of New York State on an issue of national importance. And now I'm going to say a few words in Spanish before turning this over to one of my colleagues. Tenemos una crisis y necesitamos resolverla inmediato. Estoy pidiendo al gobernador Cuomo una orden ejecutiva dando el poder a mi oficina para investigarle uso de fuerza de la policía cuando resulte en la muerte de un ciudadano desarmado. Es esencial devolver a confianza público con investigaciones independientes en estos trágicos casos. And with that, I'm now going to turn this over to a colleague who's been very, very vocal on this issue, whose support I greatly appreciate, Public Advocate Letitia James.
Thank you.
And alum of the New York State Attorney General's office.
Thank you, Attorney General. It is secret. It is behind closed doors. The district attorney controls the evidence. The district attorney is the only individual who can ask questions. The outcome can only be unsealed by request of the district attorney. This is a teachable moment, and this is the time which requires leadership in the state of New York. Recent events in Missouri, and indeed here in New York, have cast a shadow on our justice system. Thousands of people are protesting around the country because of Michael Brown and Eric Gardner and countless other cases. They're protesting because they believe that justice was not served. And in both cases and in other cases, local prosecutors are tasked with investigating local police officers who they rely upon to build their cases. The outcome of the grand jury proceedings in both of these cases demonstrates that it is unrealistic to expect district attorneys who rely upon local police to make their cases to be absolutely impartial when investigating police misconduct. We need to remove the conflict of interest. We need to remove the appearance of bias. We need to shed sunlight on this process. Our system of government works best when there are checks and balances. And inherent in the current grand jury process, there are no checks and balances. Our system works best when we are focused on justice and not political turf. It is imperative that a special prosecutor with no connection to the local police department pursue police misconduct cases. And in this particular instance, we should make sure that the governor of the state of New York appoints one who is temporary. There is no reason why that should not apply to cases of police misconduct. And that is why I am standing here today with Attorney General Eric Schneiderman, because we must restore faith in our justice system. New York has always been a leader, and other states follow us. And this is truly a teachable moment, a moment that requires leadership. We have an opportunity to change the national dialogue, the national discussion on how local prosecutors investigate cases of police misconduct, particularly when it leads to death. District attorneys are some of our finest public servants. And the current system, however, that relies on district attorneys to be exclusively responsible for investigating and prosecuting cases of police misconduct is broken. New York state law authorizes the governor. Currently, it authorizes the governor to exercise the authority to appoint a special prosecutor. And in fact, many previous governors have done so under somewhat similar circumstances, including Teddy Roosevelt and Mario Cuomo. We are looking to remedy the problems of today and create lasting change in the system. That includes potentially establishing a permanent independent special prosecutor for serious police offenses or a temporary one. And I look forward to working with Attorney General Schneiderman and everyone interested in reforming our system or responding to all of the young people who are taking to our streets every night for dealing with allegations and evidence of police misconduct and restoring confidence in our criminal justice system. Thank you.
Thank you. And now a longtime colleague of mine in many Struggles for Justice New York City Controller Scott Stringer.
Well, thank you, Attorney General. And we are here today in support of a proposal that would strengthen the public's faith and confidence in the criminal justice system. It is our responsibility to ensure that law enforcement treats everyone fairly and equally. We can and must improve the way that cases like Garner are investigated and prosecuted. District attorneys work hard every day, prosecuting thousands of cases in our courts. Their work is essential to keeping our communities safe, and we should honor their service to New York State. However, confidence in our system of law enforcement will erode if there is even the appearance or suggestion of a conflict of interest in the administration of justice. Concerns about the perception of investigations into police misconduct by local prosecutors are not new. In 1971, after a year of hearings, the Blue Ribbon Knapp Commission recognized the appearance of a conflict of interest when a local DA investigates and prosecutes police misconduct. As a result, it recommended, and Governor Nelson Rockefeller at the time established, an independent special prosecutor's office that superseded the jurisdiction of the 5 local DAs in New York City. In 2000, the United States Commission on Civil Rights found that state prosecution of police misconduct cases is not effective primarily because DA or county attorneys rely heavily upon the support and cooperation of police departments. And that is why I'm pleased to stand with my colleagues to support a temporary executive order that would give District Attorney General Schneiderman the authority to investigate such cases and, where appropriate, prosecute them. Here's why this is important. The State Attorney General, representing all the counties in our state, has the unique ability to see beyond the local street corner. He can see things in a way that looks not at the local issues, but to create a great appearance of fairness and equality through this process. Our Attorney General has the credibility and the stature now, at this moment in time, to begin this very serious dialogue and hard work. We must stand behind him. The fact is that in this case today, we need to restore confidence. We've got great district attorneys. They work very hard. But now we have to think beyond street corners, beyond local jurisdictions, and appoint someone with impeccable credentials who can do this work throughout our state. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce another longtime ally from many struggles for justice, Congressman Jerry Nadler.
Thank you very much. The news we see on television and the radio and the newspapers every day shows unequivocally the extent of the crisis of confidence in this country today, in the state today, in our criminal justice system. Many, many people, especially people of color, have no confidence whatsoever that justice will be done when law enforcement improperly inflicts harm or even death on innocent, unarmed people. We have seen this repeatedly. We see this now. The failure of the grand jury to indict in the Eric Garner case, in which there was no question of ample probable cause for an indictment, demonstrates unequivocally the need for an independent investigator with prosecutorial authority in all cases where someone is killed at the hands of the police. The district attorney, as we've heard, has an inherent conflict of interest because of his or her necessarily close day-to-day working relationship with the police upon whom he or she relies for his investigations. So we need, if we're going to have any confidence in justice in situations where people are killed at the hands of the police, if the police are going to be, when exonerated, regarded as innocent, if people are going to have confidence that when they're not innocent, they will be properly prosecuted, we have to have independent prosecution. The governor can and should deputize the Attorney General for this purpose, pending definitive action by the legislature. The legislature can act and should act, but we all know at best it will not act with dispatch. Hopefully it will act. But meanwhile, I commend Attorney General Schneiderman on his proposal, his willingness to step up to the plate, and his proposal to use existing law to deputize the Attorney General in effect as a special prosecutor in these cases on an ongoing basis. That would go a long way toward assuring justice and toward assuring the appearance of justice and giving people confidence and calming the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman. And now a warrior who worked with me 5 years ago to repeal the Rockefeller drug laws and has been a fighter for justice for a long time, Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams.
Thank you. Thank you. And I wanted to add my voice to really commending the AG, the Attorney General, for looking at this issue and coming up with resolutions. He was the voice of reason when we moved to repeal Rockefeller drug law, and this is what the people of the state expected from him. I believe my colleagues have stated the reasons for this initiative and why it's imperative for the governor to move forward. It's clear. This is not an indictment on the men and women who serve on the grand jury. It is not an indictment on the 5 district attorneys. They do an admirable job. The reality is that it is easier for the grand jury to investigate Joe, who robs a coffee shop, than it is for them to investigate Bob, who's a rogue cop. That's what this is about. The challenge that comes with that initiative and the challenge that comes with presenting information and evidence in front of the grand jury. As a former police officer, I'm well aware how the grand jury mechanism operates. I know the challenge that comes from the process, that district attorneys had to communicate with me and my police officers repeatedly on investigating crimes. It is a very difficult situation to be in, and we should not put our district attorneys in that process or in that place. This has 3 important elements. 1, it's a temporary fix until we deal with the issues in a legislative fashion. 2, it has been done before. We are not creating something new here. 3, we have a very capable, knowledgeable Attorney General that can see this in a very fair fashion. We are not attempting to put something in place that would inhibit the fairness of ensuring that police officers receive their due when they take police actions. We want to ensure that we reinstall the confidence in the criminal justice system. Thank you.
Thank you. And now another colleague of mine. We have a lot of West Siders here today, no surprise. Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer.
Thank you very much. I just want to thank the Attorney General for giving so much hope, because for those of us who've been out protesting and for the thousands of people across the country, but particularly in New York City, and for those family and friends who have watched the horrific situation with Mr. Garner being killed on television over and over again. And then when you're out protesting, you really don't know what kind of action you can take. And people are asking that. They are complaining, upset, crying. But here's an Attorney General who is saying there's something that we can do that is very specific and something that makes sense. So I just want to say that New York needs, as the Attorney General has stated, a reliable method of dealing with deaths from police actions against unarmed civilians, as we saw, in my opinion, with Mr. Garner. And I want to add that there is a standing executive order in the past from the governor directing the state attorney general to act as a special prosecutor in such instances, just as is now done in cases of Medicaid fraud. So this is not a new concept. And so it's just such a method could take place until the legislature, if it does, decides to act. So I think that I want to echo the words of my colleagues. I work constantly with the New York District Attorney, for instance. He does a great job. I know that this would be a temporary method, perhaps, but it would give hundreds and thousands of people who are calling us, asking us, working with us, calling and begging to say, what can we do that makes sense to deal with this discord between community and police, particularly in the communities of color. So I want to thank the Attorney General for living up to what he said he was going to do when he was elected, which is to gain the trust of the people of the state of New York, and he's doing just that by suggesting this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I now want, out of consideration for all of you here today, we're not going to be able to have everyone speak, but we are going to have a representative of the Senate and the Assembly members and City Council speak, and I'd like to first call up the sponsor of legislation, co-sponsored by Assemblymember Keith Wright, sponsor in the New York State Senate, who has been engaged on this issue, Gustavo Rivera.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. I believe in law and order, and I believe in justice. And the unfortunate reality of the Eric Garner case, as well as many other cases during the years, have shown us that unfortunately the way that the system is working right now does not function equally. And unfortunately, in communities like the ones I represent, that most need policing, the trust is not there. I'm here today to support the Attorney General's ask, which is a very simple one. We can and must act immediately to assuage that fear, to make sure that we can reestablish the trust. And also, I stand here with my Democratic colleagues and certainly behind our leader, Andrea Stewart Cousins, to say that we believe and know that we have an obligation when we go back up to Albany to make sure that we get legislative change that is long-term. We look forward to doing that up in Albany, and we look forward to working with our colleagues in the Senate, including some of our Republican colleagues, that should recognize that this is an opportunity to reestablish that trust that currently does not exist in places like the communities that I represent. Yo creo en la justicia y creo en la ley y el orden. Y desafortunadamente los casos que han ocurrido, el caso de Eric Garner y muchos otros casos, desafortunadamente la confianza en el sistema de justicia se ha perdido en comunidades como la que yo represento. Estoy aquí hoy para apoyar a Eric Schneiderman en lo que podemos hacer inmediatamente, pero estoy aquí como parte de la conferencia demócrata para decir que tenemos una necesidad de hacer cambios legislativos a largo plazo y que estamos dispuestos a volver a Albany en enero a hacer estos cambios. Y pedimos a nuestros colegas republicanos que reconozcan que no solamente hay una oportunidad, pero que más nada tenemos una obligación como un consejo, como el Senado, para hacer cambios legislativos a largo plazo que son necesarios para restablecer la confianza de nuestras comunidades con el sistema de ley. Muchas gracias.
And now I'd like to call up Assemblymember Marcos Crespo.
Thank you, Attorney General. I, too, stand here today in support of this proposal. As an Assembly member serving in a House that has for so long led the fight for reforms, but seen so many of these great ideas pass our House, and the buck stops there. I also stand here as a representative of a borough who has seen its fair share of injustice around these issues. Whether we talk about Amadou Diallo, Anthony Baez, Marley Graham, or so many other victims of questionable interactions with law enforcement and the outcomes that we know led to their loss of life. Enough is enough. But I stand here today with you because I believe that this proposal is logical. I believe this proposal is appropriate. And I believe that at a time when so many people across so many racial lines, income lines, and geographic lines stand together clamoring for change, clamoring for a little bit of, they're expressing that they feel suffocated by the lack of justice. Well, I believe that this proposal injects a breath of fresh air into this debate, into this conversation, allows us to address in a temporary fashion an issue that then gives us some time to work on a real transformational package around police-community relations. We have had these packages before. They've been named the Diallo package, the Marley Graham package. We've named them and renamed them. But for too long, a number of ideas have been stuck. And it's about time that we offer the people of this state an opportunity to feel comfort in a justice system that needs fixing and allows us the time to have constructive debates with all of our partners about how we can proceed and move forward. Como asambleísta, representando una comunidad que ha visto un sinnúmero de casos donde las personas inocentes no armadas han perdido la vida en las manos de las personas instruidas a protegernos. Nos sentimos ya sofocados por la falta de justicia en estos casos. Estamos cansados de ver la muerte de las personas de nuestra comunidad y entender de que el proceso siempre conlleva al mismo fin, donde no hay cargos para las personas responsables. Yo me estoy aquí con el fiscal del estado de Nueva York apoyando esta propuesta que es lógica, sensible y nos permite una resolución efectiva y temporaria, mientras que la legislatura discute las diferentes propuestas y un paquete de reformas más extensivas. La gente está en las calles hoy expresando que se sienten sofocados por la falta de justicia. Lo escuchamos en las palabras del señor Garner antes de morir, cuando dijo que no podía respirar. Yo creo que esta propuesta es un respiro de aire fresco a la conversación de reformas y de un mejor sistema de justicia para el estado de Nueva York. Y le pido al gobernador que escuche nuestras plegarias, que sea sincero al haber expresado en los últimos días que él también quiere ver una reforma. Yo creo que el fiscal está posicionado efectivamente para ayudarnos a crear imparcialidad y tener un mejor sistema en el que las personas de nuestra comunidad pueden confiar.
Thank you. Thank you. Assemblyman, I want to note that we've been joined by Senator Jose Serrano and Assemblymember Francisco Moya. And now I'd like to call up someone who is has introduced legislation I want to call attention to particularly because it addresses an area of law, a statute that most people are not aware of that makes it even more important that the legislature move forward for comprehensive reform, and that is Assemblyman Nick Perry.
Thank you, Attorney General Schneiderman. We're here today because a number of travesties occurred on Staten Island. The death of an unarmed citizen and the finding of the grand jury is a travesty that tests and challenges the very foundations of our democracy. It shouldn't be just a promise and a hope, but a reality for all Americans, including African American families, African American men, women, and children, that our justice system will treat them equally as is guaranteed in the Constitution. Unfortunately, the family of Mr. Garner don't feel that way today, and so many Americans have joined them in sharing that feeling. So we are challenged as legislators and leaders to make that strong, bold move in the interest of ensuring that our democracy can breathe. Mr. Garner, Eric Garner died crying for his life, repeating over and over again, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. The proposals by the Attorney General and other proposals that we will try to champion with the help of the Attorney General to become law will help to secure for New York State a place as a leader in our national efforts to fix this problem. It's a nationwide problem. It's a problem that needs to be fixed. And I commend the Attorney General for his vision and the hard work that he has and the bold move in making this request to the governor. We can't count on the federal government to fix the problems in New York. We really need to do it ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I'd like to call up City Council Member Brad Lander.
Thank you very much. An honor to stand here with the Attorney General, along with my colleagues, Council Members Dan Garodnick, Mark Levine, Matthew Eugene, and we were earlier joined by Council Members Adonis Rodriguez, Jimmy Van Bramer, and Corey Johnson. This smart, viable, immediately actionable step that is proposed today is one very important part of moving forward from what happened last week in Staten Island and the week before in Ferguson. It is not by itself certainly enough to heal the frayed bonds of trust between police and communities across the country, for which we're seeing so much passion and anger and an insistent cry for justice. But it is essential, and the need for it is clear. The case for it was made cogently and, in my opinion, decisively just a few days ago in the New York Times by a former prosecutor, Paul Butler, now an attorney at professor, at Georgetown Law School. Again, a former prosecutor who lays out in clear detail the ways in which the totally appropriate close working relationship must develop between prosecutors and police that they work with to try every single case in their jurisdiction. That gives you an appropriately deep respect for the good police that you're working with on a daily basis to make cases, the risks they're taking, the things that are necessary. But over time, that close working relationship makes it simply structurally impossible, based on natural human sympathies and the structural demands of the justice system, for that very same district attorney to be the objective and fair prosecutor of those exact police officers when the situation demands, when an unarmed civilian is killed, and when natural human sympathies must not stand in the way of objective investigation and the objective requirements of prosecution. And I'd urge people to look at his article, because to me it is really decisive that this is necessary. So I appreciate the Attorney General making it possible. In that same article, Professor Butler cites Felix Frankfurter's call that justice must satisfy the appearance of justice. And there is simply no question today, from Ferguson to Staten Island, that there is no way the appearance of justice or actual structural justice can be met through local district attorneys prosecuting these cases. I give great credit to the Attorney General for coming up with this very quick-acting solution, and several of the other people up here, including the public advocate, who moved quickly to call for it. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. And I apologize if I've missed anyone. I appreciate everyone's presence here. Just to close, please, I urge you all to look at the letter that I've sent to the governor. What this is a temporary request for a temporary order to buy us time, but also to channel attention where it belongs, which is on Albany. The law of the state of New York must be changed. And to the extent there are people saying that is not true, let me make this point. Assemblyman Perry's bill would amend county law, Section 701, which is the only procedure, other than the governor appointing me to serve as a special prosecutor. The governor can only appoint an attorney general. County law section 701, the law under that, is such that if Dan Donovan, who's a colleague of mine who I respect, had gone to court to say, I don't like the appearance here, I'd like to be replaced, that would be denied. The case law in New York is such that even a district attorney who wanted to avoid the appearance of impropriety cannot do it. The only thing that can happen now is that the governor can, in any case, appoint me and my office to act to take over a case. I'm asking for the temporary authority to do that, to buy us some time, to make sure that the legislative solution that comes from Albany is complete, is fair, and that the process of enacting that legislation restores public confidence in that our state government can deal with an issue as pressing as this. I thank all of my colleagues.
So time for a couple of questions. Before you ask your questions, I would ask you, a lot of people up here, please ask who it's directed to. Please say who you are now with the process.
My question is, how would it work with the state police then? Because I think members of the state police are part of your organized crime task force, so would that also give the perception of bias if you were having to investigate them? Do you know what I mean?
No, the state police are not under my jurisdiction. Our organized crime task force works with other law enforcement agencies to coordinate things in some investigations. But this would apply to all police officers and peace officers of the state of New York.
Hi, Rebecca from the Wall Street Journal. I'm just wondering whether you had gone over this with the DA in New York, and specifically, I know that DA Thompson in Brooklyn has said he didn't believe that a special prosecutor should be appointed in the Akai Garland case or in other cases in his office. What would you say to that?
Well, I have spoken to some of my colleagues who are district attorneys. The letter again makes it very clear that we're seeking an order that would not interfere with the grand jury in the Gurley case or the federal investigation in the Garner case. It's prospective only, and it is intended to impel the state legislature or those who are resistant in the legislature to taking the action that must be taken.
Darla Miles, WABC.
say to those people who are unhappy with those cases, and if there's any recourse in your office for those cases?
Well, I would say that the existing law, which appears to have been followed in these cases, has to be changed. This is not anti-DA. This is certainly not anti-NYPD. I have the highest respect for the men and women of the police department and for Commissioner Bratton, who's undertaking and was undertaking before these tragic instances some of the most fundamental reforms that have taken place in that department in a long time. This is simply a prospective order so that if, and I hope it does not ever occur, an unarmed civilian is killed by acts of a law enforcement officer, my office would have jurisdiction only until the state legislature takes action, as it must take action, and I think this will add to the public pressure that is mounting for them to do that.
Avi Faber, Capital New York. For the public advocate, for the comptroller, and for the borough president, do you think the governor should appoint an independent prosecutor for the Aguilar case?
So it's my understanding that District Attorney Thompson has already convened a grand jury, and so the initiative that we're discussing here today would be prospective, and I support the Attorney General.
Let me just, and I just want to make it very clear that we really do have the highest respect for the great work of District Attorney Thompson, Cy Vance, all of our district attorneys. But this prospective proposal, I think, will go a long way in assuring the public that these cases will be dealt with an Attorney General who has a broader perspective and a broader reach.
Talking about indictments here, so people may be prepared for indictment in the future, but in many of these cases, officers are acquitted after a trial, and people are still very sentiment to go back to the Amadou Diallo and some of the other cases, folks are rejected or upset. What's your message to the people, because they continue to march this week of quote-unquote week of outrage?
Well, I think that, first of all, I want to commend the people of the city for showing how to voice your complaint without violence. It's about being constructive without being destructive. And when you look at the diversity of the people who are voicing their concern, these are the grandchildren of the civil rights movement. They're coming from all ethnicities, all background, and this is how you should voice your complaint. What the call is for is not an erosion of the prosecutor's powers. It's the rebuilding of confidence in the system. And when you go to a jury and through the process of, number one, the indictment process to determine if there's enough to go to trial and go through the jury process, people may be upset of the outcome, but it is done through transparency. There's nothing transparent about the current process. And so the system has never been built on receiving 100% agreement on the outcome. It has been built with the concept that at least we see the transparency of the process and the clear definition of equality of how it was done. We can't continue to see these investigations go into the black hole of the grand jury system and don't come out with the light of day of how do we come to the determining factor of did we get an indictment or did we not get an indictment. And I think that is what's needed. So we're not going to get 100% agreement, but one thing we do know that there is a preponderance of evidence that something is wrong with an archaic system that came out of Britain that we are still using. We can't continue to use Oxcart methods in an iPad age. It must change.
And that is not a knock at Great Britain, but the system given our visitors today. But the borough president is absolutely correct that the grand jury system has its roots in the 1600s, and we are currently, I believe, the United States is the only country in the world that continues to use that process as a part of our criminal justice system.
Sorry, who are you with?
Well, Well, first of all, there is nothing here that states, and please read my letter, that DAs cannot be objective in these cases. We have to recognize the loss of confidence in the process and the urgent need to restore confidence so that the people of the city of New York have faith in and confidence and trust in the men and women of the NYPD who serve and protect them every day. The point of this is that there needs to be change in our criminal justice system. Change is hard to come by in Albany. It took us more than 30 years of activism and protests until we could repeal the Rockefeller drug laws, and I had to go door to door in the New York State Senate to get the 32 votes needed to undo those laws, which I think 5 years later are regarded broadly as having been a mistake and draconian. I know some members of my staff have spoken to members of the governor's staff. I don't know exactly what has happened since then, but we will look forward to working with all of our colleagues to see that public confidence is restored and give some time for the legislature to do the right thing. Well, the governor, and this actually goes to a point in the previous question, there is no law that allows opening of grand jury records. The courts in New York are very, very tough about that. It's a felony to disclose something that goes on in a grand jury. There is existing law that allows the governor to appoint the attorney general to supersede any district attorney in any circumstance. So I'm hopeful that the governor will authorize this. I think that I hope I never would have to use this power because I hope there are no deaths between now and the time the legislature takes action of unarmed civilians at the hands of law enforcement officers, but that would be the situation. Executive law, Section 63, and again, I would urge you all to look at the areas of law here and that govern this process. They must be fixed, and I think any objective observer who looks at them will say they must be fixed. The only office that the governor can appoint under Executive Law Section 63 is the Office of the Attorney General. Any other person designated by the Attorney General has their power derivative from the Attorney General. The governor cannot appoint anyone else, and the district attorney cannot get a special prosecutor appointed based simply on the appearance of a conflict of interest. The law is broken. He has to fix it. The only thing that could be done under law as it exists now is for the governor to appoint my office.
So, just to clarify, are you in support of a permanent special prosecutor either at your office or, an appointee? And also, second, unrelated, Legal Aid Society has asked to unseal all the minutes here. Is your office in support or in opposition or any position on that?
I'm not taking a position on what the final legislative outcome should be. I think that I'm certainly willing to participate and willing to be a part of that solution. I look forward to working with my colleagues on it, and I would respectfully suggest that having been in cases in efforts to unseal grand jury minutes, the case law in New York and the state of law is extraordinarily tough. It is very hard to get a ruling in favor of that in the state of New York. Last year, in this past year, we've been involved in trying to unseal a report relating to the Attica massacre that that included some references to grand jury material, and the judge has ordered us to redact every reference to anything in the grand jury. This law is tough. The governor's ability to appoint the attorney general to handle these cases is clear.
So this request only deals with actions that result in death. Would you think that it would actually undermine the position of local prosecutors in cases that may result not in death but serious injury, for example?
No, we wanted to make this as narrow as possible. It was certainly open to discussions with the governor about modification. It ultimately is his call, but this is not, and the letter makes very clear, this is not intended to suggest in any way, shape, or form that prosecutors are not responsible, that DAs are not responsible and don't do their job. The DAs of New York State are great folks. There is a problem when the state of the law does not allow even those DAs to request that someone replace them in a case where they feel there's a conflict.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.